Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the regular session of the Lincoln Parish School Board for February 4th, 2025. I would ask you to rise to be led by the invocation by Donna Doss, and then we'll have some second grade students of Hillcrest lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Ms. Donna.
Father God, we come to you today so thankful to be part of this board and to serve in the needs of our community. Lord, please put your loving hand on the schools, all of our children, the faculty, the administrators, the parents, and the children especially. Lord, we come to you and we are so thankful for the presence of peace that you give us, for hearing our prayers, and for giving us comfort when we need them. Be with us as we go through this board meeting and let us do whatever is your will, for we ask these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Attention, salute, pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. What's happening, man? What a great job. Thank you. Okay, so hopefully you've had a chance before you came to the meeting to review the agenda for today's meeting. Anyway, hopefully you've had a chance to review the agenda. If so, I'll take a motion that we accept it as presented. So moved by Mr. Hancock. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Mitchum. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say no. Thank you very much. Also, you have hopefully had the chance to review the minutes from last month's meeting of January 7th. And if so, I'll take a motion that we introduce those as printed.
So moved.
So moved by Donna Doss. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Linda Henderson. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say no.
No.
Thank you, sir. All right, now we'd like to welcome Becky Sutherland, principal of Hillcrest Elementary.
Hi, welcome to Hillcrest. We're happy to have you all here with us today, and we want to especially thank the Lincoln Parish School Board members for the dedication and commitment to serving students, faculty, and community members of our school district. We appreciate you being here with us today and demonstrating your partnership with us and our shared goal of student achievement. I have enjoyed your time visiting our classrooms, and I hope you have as well, and seeing some of the UFI lessons. Our students, they love to have company, and they love to show off what they're learning. UFI has been a pivotal piece of the reading success that our students are experiencing this year. We can only imagine the difference we will continue to see in the coming years. I tell our teachers all the time, they have one of the most important jobs in the world. They're teaching kids how to read. We're excited about the good things happening at Hillcrest. We're celebrating a 10% increase in the number of students scoring proficient or above from beginning of the year to middle of the year on the Dibbles assessment. And we know this number will continue to increase over the next few months as our students continue to do their best. Every morning I have the opportunity to meet with our students and our faculty right here in this gym at 7:15. We have morning announcements, we recognize student achievement, we say the pledge, and we recite good, better, best. Now, I was here this summer and I was walking down the hall one day after a very busy day, and those simple words came to my mind. And I wondered why, after all these years of hearing my children say it, and as an adult, that it still stuck with me. So I did a little research, and I quickly found out that Tim Duncan, a former NBA player who played for the San Antonio Spurs, had made this very popular, because he mentioned it in his induction speech for the Hall of Fame. And what he said was his parents, they had zero knowledge of basketball, but they taught him more about the game than anyone else. always do your best. So our vision for our students at Hillcrest is that they are supported, they are going to have high expectations, and we're always doing our best. So I brought some of my very best friends to come along this morning and share with you how we begin our day every day, saying that we will do our best. So you guys come on in, please. You'll welcome a few little hawks this morning, or this afternoon. We've gone over that. And this is what I love. And I can start my day with about 300 people that look like this. Their smiles are contagious. Their hugs are the best. This is what it's about, folks. All right. This is what we do. All right, now it's your turn. I want you to say it like you mean it. Ready? Let's go.
Good, better, best. Never let it rest till your good is better and your better is best.
Very good. Good job. All right, thank you so much. Now, as we say every day, let's go be great, and as always, let's do our best. Thank you again.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Sutherland. Okay, moving on to item 6 on the agenda is unfinished business. Do we have any unfinished business before this board today? Seeing none, we'll move on to item number 7. The first item under 7.1 is the independent auditor's report. Amy Tynes and Juanita Duke.
Thank you so much. It's this time of the year that we bring to the board the completed auditor's report for the fiscal year ending June 30, 2024. We have complied with all of the requirements that the auditors asked of us, signed off on all certifications, and they have completed the report, which has been filed with the Legislative Auditor's Office, and who released it, I believe, 2 weeks ago. And I'd like to introduce you Amy Tynes. She's the accounting manager over the audit, and we've worked with her for many years, and we enjoy working with her, and she does a very thorough job. And I'd like to turn over now to her to present the report and our financials to you at this time.
Good afternoon. How are you guys doing?
Wonderful.
You should have 2 packets in front of you, 2 bound reports. One is the thicker one. This is the financials that we'll discuss. This is called an Annual Comprehensive Financial Report, or you'll hear us mention it as ACFR, just for the acronym for it. And then the smaller one is the single audit. So I'm just going to hit the high points of the report. If you have any questions, please feel free to stop and ask, or I will show you where our letterhead is, so you can always contact me even after the meeting to ask your questions. The first thing I would like to point out to you is on page 29. And this is the independent auditor's opinion letter. This does have our contact information on the top of the page in case you need to contact me at a later date. But as it states in the first 2 paragraphs, we did issue what we call a unmodified opinion. Means the financials were materially correct as of June 30th, 2024. You'll hear it called unmodified, but basically that means there's no modifications to the report, so therefore it's a clean opinion. If you turn to the financials, the first financials I would like to present is on page 54. On page 54 and 55, this is where it's what we call a full accrual method, where we have to take the school board's day-to-day books and we basically put them almost as if a for-profit company, where all your assets, all your liabilities are on the books. Main thing I like to point out on this statement is if the school board, as of June 30th, received all the assets, whether it be equipment, cash, receivables, or what have you, and they paid off all the liabilities that are owed as of June 30th, that bottom line, we would actually, is a deficit of $68 million. One of the reasons for this is several years ago, or quite a few years ago, the Standards Board for the Governmental Accounting Standards Boards basically said, hey, for governments, we promise that if you give your service to the government, we promise for your pension until you pass away, as well as your health care. And basically, the Standards Board said, okay, we want to know what that dollar is for that promise. So right in the middle of the page, you're going to see two amounts there. One is the OPEB liability and one's net pension liability. Collectively, that promise equates to $180 million. That is why you show the deficit for the year, is because of that liability. If you had not had that, we would actually not have a deficit. For your day-to-day financials, these actually start on page 58. And the main thing I like to point out to you is the general funds fund balance. As of fiscal year end 2024, the general funds fund balance was $36.9 million, not quite $37 million. The unassigned fund balance is $24.3 million. This equates to 37.6% of the total expenses for the general fund. The ad valorem tax for the 2000 fund, or 2000 ad valorem, its fund balance is $8.5 million. You'll also see this year, if you compare this report to last year's report, we have a new column in the front. This is dealing with the Simsboro bond. Since we did have the sale of the bond this year, so now it's considered to be a major fund. With the sale and the interest, it has $10.3 million as of June 30th, 2024. So a lot of your projects haven't really gotten started yet as of the fiscal year. The non-major, we'll go over what that makes up in a few minutes, but that had $37.7 million in fund balance. If you skip over to pages 60 and 61, this is the profit and loss statements, the revenues and expenditures for these same funds. The main thing I like to point out is the general funds revenue was $68.1 million. This is actually a $5.8 million increase from last year. One of the big ticket items you'll see there is under state other is $2.8 million. The majority of that is the stipend money that the state provided for the stipends for the teachers to be paid out. And then the other bigger ticket items that were increased was MFP increased about $1 million. And then the interest, actually, due to the interest rates, actually increased around $800,000. The total expenses for the year for the general fund were $64.7 million. This is also an increase. The increase is $3.5 million from last year. The bulk of that, though, is going to be those stipends that the state gave to be paid out, and then the remainder were other increases in cost. The increase in fund balance before transfers in and out was $3.4 million. However, if you'll look on page 61, it's like the fourth line from the bottom. After transfers in and out, we actually had an increase of $7.4 million, almost 7.5, leaving that $36.9 million in fund balance. The ad valorem tax had a decrease in fund balance of $1.6 million, so therefore it went from $10 million to $8.5. And then again, you'll see that Simsboro fund balance of the $10 million for the new sale. Now, the other part of the financials is the internal service fund. This makes up your health care and your workers' comp fund, since you're self-insured. The profit and loss statement is on page 64. And for the year June 30th, 2024, you actually had a loss of this in these funds of $2.1 million. The main thing is actually due to the increase in claims. The increase in claims was around $2.6 million this year, causing the loss in those funds. However, the net position is still $1.6 million, so there's still funds remaining. I'm not going to go through each one, but I do want to point out on page 118 and 119, as I mentioned, the general fund makes up several various taxes as well as general accounts. So this is the more detail of that general fund, so you can sort of see how each fund and each tax fund had as far as their increase in fund balance or decrease in fund balance. Actually, as far as the increases, every one of these funds actually had an increase in fund balance for this year of the $7.4 million, and those you'll be able to see on page 120 and 121. For that non-major governmental fund, if you flip over to page 131, it makes up several different types of activity. One is what we call special revenue funds. Those are mainly your other M&O funds, your maintenance and operations, as well as various federal grants, child nutrition, as well as even your student activity funds. We have to combine all the school account information and include in this. The other is your debt service. Those are those funds specifically to pay out the debt as you bring in various ad valorem taxes or sales tax to pay that out. Ad valorem for y'all's case. And then the last is the capital projects fund. Main thing of those is going to be you have still some money insurance proceeds left, as well as the parish-wide capital projects. For more detail of those, for the special revenue funds, those start on page 138. You'll see for our school lunch program, we actually had a loss of $358,000 this year, but they still do have a positive fund balance of $1.2 million. Then the various sales taxes, and then each of those M&Os that you'll see on page 139. I'm not going to go through those, but if you have a question, feel free to ask. These funds actually continue over to page 140 and 141. The only M&O fund that actually had a loss this year was the Simsboro District Number 3. All the other ones actually had an increase in fund balance. And then this statement also carries forward to page 142 and 143, and this is where you can see the student activity funds collectively, how those funds, the ins and outs of those. For the debt service funds, those are actually on page 158 and 159. Each one of your debt service funds actually had an increase in fund balance where the monies being brought in were less than the amount being paid out in principal and interest. And so their total increase collectively in fund balance was $2.5 million, leaving a $17.3 million in fund balance for future debt service. And then the last I want to point out on here is page 162 is your capital projects fund. And one thing I just want to show you, it does look a little unusual on page 162. And that's because had a new GASB standard that came out this year that said if you had a particular fund go from what we call a non-major, and for it to be a non-major, it has to be less than 10% in either total assets, liabilities, revenues, or expenditures of the total government. So if any of these funds actually reach the 10% mark of the total government, we're required to move them up in the front. Well, last year, the Simsboro Fund was just getting started. Y'all had not sold the debt, so it looks very odd, but we didn't make a mistake on it. It just shows like a blank column. And the new standard basically says for reconciling purposes, for someone going from last year's report to this year, we sort of have to start the beginning fund balance there, but then move all the activity to the front. So that's why that column looks a little strange there. So the only capital funds that actually had fund balance except for the Simsboro Fund is your capital projects, the parish-wide one, actually had an increase in fund balance of $1.6 million. So their fund balance went from $457,000 to $2 million. And then you still had some insurance proceeds. Its increase was basically the interest, around $113,000. For the details of the internal service fund, you'll see how much each of those make as far as whether it's workers' comp and health insurance. That's on page 165. And as I mentioned, the bulk of that is the health insurance, and that's really the reason for the loss for the year of the $2 million. And then on page 168, for our student activity funds, we sort of break out, since we're having to pull all of the school's information in that statement, just sort of lets you know, okay, how much each school represented in the fund balance for the student activity funds. Any questions on the financials before I go to the single audit report? Okay, if you go to the smaller report, The first thing I would like to point out is page 10 and 11. This is what we call the schedule of federal expenditures. And basically for the June 30th, 2024 fiscal year end, the total federal dollars that the school board received was $22.8 million. Based on those various buckets of funding that the school board receives, we're required to go through and determine which programs are required to be tested. This year, due to the finding last year, we actually were required to test the child nutrition program. And then also we tested the ESSER funds and then the new grant that you guys received, the COPS grant. On page 13 is the summary of the auditor's results. You'll notice on that it has two sections. One's the financial audit part. What we test in that area is not only your financial information, we also look at internal controls for the agency as a whole, and then we also test the state compliance information. And that's regarding either budget, bid law, things of that nature. The AFR that's required to be submitted, there are certain criteria that we look at for state compliance. As I mentioned on page 13, for the financial statement audit, we issued an unmodified opinion. Therefore, it was a clean opinion. We had no findings for the financials nor the state compliance. For the federal awards, we also issued an unmodified opinion. And again, as I mentioned, we tested the child nutrition program, the ESSER program, and the COPS grant, and we had no findings this year. So even though we had some pretty tough findings last year for the child nutrition, all of those had been resolved for the 2024 year. Therefore, the report is clean. Again, we had no findings or management comments. I'm not going to go over the details, but I just want to point out to you we have two agreed upon procedures report. One is the statewide agreed upon procedures that we've been doing for several years. The state dictates what we're required to test. That starts on page 20. And I will say this year the state sort of changed the rule. They basically said, okay, for the 2024 fiscal year end, if your report was submitted timely, and if there were no material weaknesses or anything significant for the audit, then for the following year, so your June 2025, we are not required this year to test all of the items in the state procedures as we had before. We would only test those that had exceptions, and you guys only had two areas of exceptions. One was dealing just with the signature and the date of review on bank reconciliations. And then also, we had a couple of exceptions dealing with credit cards. When we pulled in, not so much at the central office, but when we do these procedures, we have to pull some of the school activity, and we had a couple of them that were either missing receipts or just didn't have the full documentation that was required. So those will be the only procedures that we would be required to test for the upcoming year. And then the last agreed upon procedures, this one's been out also for quite a few years. It starts on page 31. And this is just dealing with the BESI agreed upon procedures. So we're required to look at certain things regarding your PEP report and your student data that you're submitted to the state. I will tell you, we did have a couple exceptions here, but we are seeing this across the board. We have been. Ever since the state has updated their system to what we call EdLinks, they're wanting us to test a point in time, and that information hasn't been very successful in giving us that point in time. We can see what the school provided them, but to see what the LDOE side has, that's just been a little bit challenging since the state updated their information. I would like to thank your staff that you guys have here. We sort of turn everybody's world upside down when we come. We don't just bother the accounting department, and so we greatly appreciate their hospital, I can't even talk, I'm sorry. Anyway, but they basically help us with everything we need. And so you guys have a great team here, and we do appreciate them. Any questions? I know I threw a lot of information at you really fast. I'm sorry.
So you're saying that the comments in the sections that's based on the last year's from the July, it doesn't apply now, right? Is that what you're saying?
For the audit, yes, ma'am. We basically state in the report that those are no longer an exception for the 2024 year, and they have been cleared. Yes, Mr. Cody and his team has you can definitely tell they have done a lot of work to get those cleared.
Anyone else? If not, thank you, Amy.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I know you do a lot of work on that, so we really appreciate it. We also like a clean record. That's a good thing, too. Okay. Moving on to item 7.2 is to consider the student uniform policy at Shudron Elementary. So, Ms. Jennifer Martin, principal of Shudron Elementary.
Hi, thank you for having me. Shudron Elementary, with board approval, wishes to implement a school uniform policy for the 25-26 school year. The benefits to school uniforms touch on a lot of different issues and concerns facing our children and parents today. I believe uniforms are an effective way to provide immediate support and positivity to our school community. Our main point is school safety. Right now, they can wear anything they want, and if you look on the playground or in the courtyard, we cannot quickly decipher who is supposed to be on our campus and who is not. And so school uniforms would help with that also. We want to provide a sense of group identity to our students where they can develop a sense that they are part of something bigger than themselves. Also, streamlining morning preparations. I think this will help our parents where they don't have to argue about what their kids are going to wear for school. And so that is something that we feel will help them. Also, by removing distracting learning environment. Sometimes our students are more worried about what they have on. Does it look like their peers? Do they have the new fashion, and not worried about what the instruction that the teacher is giving. And so we feel like school uniforms will help with them being distracted. Also, we want to be aligned with Shudron High School. So 6th through 12th grade at Shudron High School is already wearing uniforms. So we feel like this is a natural progression for them. So I would appreciate y'all considering that.
Thank you very much. So I will accept a motion based upon Ms. Martin's request that we pass the uniform policy at Shudron Elementary. So moved by Mr. Hancock. Do I have a second? Second. Donna Doss has a second. At this point, since we are going to vote on this matter, if anyone would like to speak on this matter, please feel free to come up to the podium, tell us who you are, and feel free to give us any thoughts you have on that matter. Any questions from the board while they're thinking about speaking? Seeing none, hearing none. All in favor to pass a uniform policy at Shudron Elementary based upon Ms. Jennifer Martin, say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say no. Okay, thank you very much. To consider a right-of-way in servitude for CenterPoint Energy, Mr. Ricky Edmiston.
Yes, sir. If you look at your background there, CenterPoint Energy Resources, they're upgrading utility service in this area, and they have requested a servitude in the area near Ruston Junior High School, and we're asking for permission for this to enter into this servitude with CenterPoint Energy.
Okay. There is a request that we grant permission. I'm sorry, I'm reading the wrong one. To consider the right-of-way in servitude for CenterPoint Energy. I know we were sent a map and the information on that in our packet. So I would receive a motion that we approve that. So moved. So moved by Mr. Clark Canterbury. Do I have a second? Second by Debbie Abram. Any comments from the audience? If you would, feel free to step up and give us your thoughts, or any questions from a board member. Seeing none, hearing none. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed say no? Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so next would be the request permission to advertise for bids to replace the 46 HVAC units at Simsboro School and Ruston Elementary. Mr. Ricky?
Yes, sir. We're continuing to move through the district and work on our HVAC project, and we need to upgrade some units at Simsboro. That'll be 28 units, and we also need to move into Ruston Elementary and do some units. And we're asking that you grant us permission to advertise for bids for the replacement of the 28 units at Simsboro and 18 at Ruston Elementary. and grant permission to district administration to accept the lowest qualified bid.
Okay. So how many at each school did you say? You said 18 and,
Well, there's 28 units at Simsboro and 18
Got it.
at Ruston Elementary.
thank you, sir.
There's gonna be one combined bid for all.
It will. Yes, we're going to do it all at once. Yes, for the district.
Any questions from the board? Any comments from the audience? Please feel free to come forward and give us your thoughts. Seeing none. All in favor, say aye. Did I take a motion on that yet? I'm sorry. I apologize. That's what happens sometimes. Thank you, Mr. Anders. I appreciate that very much. I need a guidance sometime. Did you have a second back there? Thank you very much, Mr. Hancock. Now, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say no. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, item 7.5, grant permission to enter board members' 2024 annual training certificates into the official minutes. Mr. Durrett?
This is just to enter that all of our board members have completed the requirements for board training this year. We just are granting your permission to enter those training certificates into the official minutes of the board meeting.
Okay, so we do have a request to enter these into the official minutes of the board meeting. Do we need to vote on that? Oh,
So my training is not correct. The special education training is not.
Her hours are not correct.
Yes.
So we need to make sure we get that corrected. Thank you for
Yes,
pointing that out.
and guys, that group is working on the time, because they have to look at the time that I entered and logged
Got it.
in.
Yes.
So they're still working on that.
So if we could make an exception to make sure we get Danielle's hours corrected on her certificate. But as far as the hours that we took with Mr.
Have at
Geis,
least, everybody has at least.
Everybody has at least
We'll get the
enough.
number of hours straight.
thank you very much. Okay. Do I take a motion that we approve the training hours that we all took? Say aye. Anybody? So moved. So moved. Thank you very much. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. I don't know. Debbie? Thank you. Okay. All in favor, say aye. Any opposed? You don't want your hours? Okay, good. All right. The last, 7.6, to grant authorization to publicly share an FCC Form 470. Debbie Pender and Seth Grigsby. Thank you, Debbie.
The Lincoln Parish School District needs to post an FCC Form 470 used in the E-rate program to initiate a competitive bidding process for Category 1 services. These services would be for the new Ruston High School softball complex. The Federal Communications Commission, or FCC, governs the E-rate program, and the FCC will pay 90% of the cost, and Lincoln Parish School Board will pay its portion of 10% for Category 1 services, contingent upon approval of the Form 470 application. Our recommendation is that the board grant permission to post an FCC Form 470 soliciting bids from service providers for the Ruston High School softball complex in accordance with state law and local policies, and grant the superintendent permission to accept a qualified bid that meets the specifications outlined in the Form 470.
Okay. Do I have a motion that we request the authorization to share the FCC Form 70?
Maybe I missed that, but where do we, the location, did we establish a location for the softball complex?
RGSA softball field, next to, over there. Yeah.
I'll make the motion.
Thank you, Donna. Do I have a second? Mr. Danny? Do we have any comments from the public? Please feel free to step up. Any questions from the board? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say no. Okay, 7.7, Mr. Young to adopt the 2025-2026 school calendar.
Thank you, Mr. Phillips. The proposed school calendar for 2025-26, this calendar exceeds the minimum instructional minutes for students, which is 63,720. We have about 65,500 minutes with some extra built-in days for emergencies. This calendar may be adjusted based on emergency closures or other mandates from the LDOE. We have 6 professional development days for teachers included as well. My recommendation is that the board approves the proposed calendar for 2025-26.
Okay, so hopefully you have in front of you in your packet a copy of the calendar. I've already gotten texts asking about days for spring break. Told them I can't tell you till I get this approved, right? So, do I have a motion that we approve the calendar as presented? Mr. Anders? Thank you very much. Do I have a second? Second. Clark Canterbury. Do I have any questions from the board or any comments from the audience? Please feel free to step up. If not, all in favor to approve the calendar, say aye. Any opposed, say no. So let it be done. Now we can send out those dates. Okay, now we're going to move into the report section of the meeting. I'm going to start off with the special education update for Phaedra Blake and Justin Barron. If you would, please.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Thank you for the opportunity to present just a few updates regarding our special education program here at Lincoln Parish. Today, Mr. Barron and I will provide just a brief overview of our ongoing efforts, collaborations, and key initiatives aimed at supporting students with disabilities. So first, let's take a look at professional development. And I truly believe as a new leader in this department, it begins with me. It's no secret that I have spent the last 12 years of my career as a school leader, and that was my comfort zone, that was my happy place. But as I moved into this new role, I knew that even though I served as a special education teacher, there was still a lot to learn. So I was presented with the opportunity to apply for the SPED Fellows Academy, which is sponsored by the Louisiana Department of Education. And I immediately jumped on that because I wanted to model for others what lifelong learning looked like and what professional development looked like. So the SPED Fellows Academy is a year-long comprehensive development program, and there were only about 22 leaders, new special education leaders from the state that were selected to participate. And so through this opportunity, I have been able to, I have been provided with mentorship and coaching, and also opportunities to collaborate with not only new special education leaders throughout our state, but also more experienced leaders. And I think it has positively impacted the work that I'm starting to learn, in this new role. So when we talk about professional development, we're not just talking about those things that we offer to teachers, but I think professional development is important for myself as well. Additionally, when we talk about professional development for special education teachers, we know that the expectation is that they know and learn the curriculum that the general education teachers are teaching as well. And so we continue to carve out time for them to be included in professional development that is offered to general education teachers, especially as it relates to high quality instruction. As we shift our focus more to academics, I think it's also important to understand one of our core beliefs here in Lincoln Parish is the idea of inclusive education. Inclusive education involves creating a whole school community where all students feel a sense of belonging and are provided the highest quality instruction that meets their individual needs. This idea requires that every adult be invested in the success of every student. So the traditional model said that those inclusion students belong to the inclusion teacher. However, when you think about inclusive education, that is no longer the case. Inclusive education requires that we as a system create structures that do not single out students with disabilities, but they are included in the regular classroom. You probably were able to witness that during your walkthroughs today when you peeked into classrooms and did not know, you weren't able to identify which students had disabilities and which were not. We know that special education and intervention should be in addition to, not instead of, core instruction. So at every chance we get, we try to make sure that our students, even those with disabilities, are inside the regular education classroom, receiving instruction from the general education teacher using high quality instructional materials. So how do we go about creating those inclusive instructional systems, especially as it relates to academics? Well, Lincoln Parish was chosen to participate in the SPED Best Practices cohort as one of only about 5 other districts in the state. This work has been guided by Nate Levinson and his partnership with the Louisiana Department of Education. The details of this work can be found in the Special Education Playbook, but it focuses on 3 things: a high focus on quality instruction, extra time to learn, which is the intervention model, and content-strong teachers. Based on the following data points, implementation of these practices have seen significant growth in other districts in Louisiana. The data says that 100% of the fastest improving school districts for students with disabilities in the state adopted the playbook and those best practices that I just mentioned. Nearly 60% of the top growth school systems in 2022 were also top growth school systems in 2023 because of their implementation of the SPED best practices. So that, of course, we want to be a part of that number, and we want to be a part of that growth. So how does this impact the work that we do for students with disabilities? Well, with the traditional approach, just like I mentioned, we saw that the students who struggle are often receiving less core instruction than typical students. That's because students with disabilities are often pulled out for specialized instruction in a separate classroom that may not even be on grade level. They're pulled for things like speech therapy, occupational therapy, adaptive PE, and again, taking them further and further away from the on-grade level material. So that sometimes creates an unintentional cycle that moves our students further and further away from the grade level content that they need in order to be successful on those end of the year standardized assessments, the assessments that they will take that are on grade level. So by adopting the SPED playbook, we have become more intentional about scheduling and keeping students with disabilities in the general education classroom, receiving instruction from content-strong teachers, and utilizing high-quality instructional materials. We have also been more intentional about what happens during intervention time and making sure that students are actually receiving extra time to learn, not extra time to finish work that could have been and should have been completed during their regular class. More importantly, however, these best practices are not only implemented for students with disabilities, but for general education students as well. And that is what true inclusion looks like. We are also piloting the case manager model at IA Lewis in an effort to increase test scores and proficiency rates. Our preliminary data looks like this model is showing signs of success, but this model is also recommended by Nate Levinson, and what happens is there is one special education teacher that is in charge of all the management pieces of the IEP, like scheduling the IEP, writing the IEP, while the other teachers are free to provide instruction inside the classroom and meet student needs, preferably in their area of strength. And so it takes us away from the idea that special education teachers have to be great at everything, at every subject, and they can focus on one particular area and provide support to students. Lastly, one additional way that we provide extra support is through our partnership with Blue Engine and their work on co-teaching and collaboration. During times where there are two teachers in the classroom, we are able to ensure that each teacher has a clearly defined role, and through this work, students receive more inclusive, differentiated instruction, which is tailored to meet their specific needs. But we don't only monitor the quantitative data, we also look at qualitative data as well, and this occurs on campuses. Our goal is always to remain connected to students, staff, and families. Our IEP facilitators hold weekly check-ins with the special education teachers on campus and more in-depth monthly teacher collaborations. I also began having monthly check-ins with principals to discuss the needs of students with disabilities and if there are any concerns related to truancy, academics, behavior, or any social emotional needs. This allows us to quickly see a problem if it exists and provide support and address any issues that may arise. Thank you again for allowing me to highlight just a few of the things that are happening here in Lincoln Parish. I will now turn it over to Mr. Barron.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Blake. Justin Barron, Student Support Services. So I just wanted to talk about a couple of things, and Ms. Blake really did a great job of kind of giving you the broader focus for us and the work that we're trying to do, trying to describe that work. I want to tell you, like I said, about a couple of different things that we've done in addition to that work, and some of it coincides with that work. So some of you may have heard at some point over the last couple of months or years that we received a grant through the U.S. Department of Education. I refer to it as the DIF grant, but DIF just simply stands for Disability Innovation Fund. So it's about $2.5 million each year $2.5 million divided up over the course of 5 years. We're in year 2 of that, but thus far, as a part of that grant, what we've been able to do, and there's a number of things, I'm just going to go through these pretty quickly. Inclusive practices training, so that includes training for district personnel, district staff, district leadership, in terms of how to ensure all of our practices, academics, financial, physical, all the pieces are working together to support the needs of all students. Core inclusion training, that's for school-based leadership. Similarly, it's how do you pull all the pieces together from a district leadership position, a school leadership position, to be as inclusive as possible. inclusive classrooms training, so that's teacher-directed training. And then this year we've done a little bit of pilot work with SPED strategies and inclusive spaces. And so that's really looking at specific classrooms, a few specific classrooms, and really working with those teachers on the ideal makeup of the classroom to support the students in those classrooms. Just to be clear, these strategies are to improve outcomes for all kids because students with disabilities are a part of all kids. So these things are going to benefit students with an IEP, but students also who don't have an IEP, who just may need a little bit of support here and there. In addition to the inclusive practices training, we are developing, through SPED strategies, a district profile. That district profile is going to review qualitative and quantitative data. So we've submitted any procedures that we have, any financial data that we have, any staffing data that we have, much like, and I know that Lean Frog has been a conversation among the board, similar in that way, and maybe even some of the tuned work. It's really just taking a good look at everything that we're doing in special education, analyzing that, and then coming up with some opportunities to build off of that. And so there's a specific quote that I want to mention. So the district profiles will illuminate opportunities for refinement in staffing structures, funding strategies, business partnerships, and family engagement. The goal of the different, and I missed this a minute ago, the goal of the different is to improve academic and career opportunities for kids, right? The goal is when they leave us, they're better equipped to go into the workplace. That's the sole goal of the DIF grant. But we realize as a part of that, it's not something we start with high school. It's work that we do starting at early ages. And so anyway, so it's really looking at the broader program that we've got across the district. We've done, as a part of that grant, we've done some work with STEM CTE spaces, invested some of those funds in a way to engage kids with career opportunities at a very young age, to hopefully build interest among those kids so they know where it is. They've identified things that they're good at, things that they're not so good at, things that they're interested in, things that they have no interest in. I know, just speaking from experience, I know that I worked outside doing some construction in college, and I knew that that was not something that I really wanted to do day in and day out. And so the goal is to provide those kids, or our kids, with opportunities to figure out what it is that they want to do early so that they can kind of navigate the path forward. In addition to that, we're also looking at transition. So term, we're looking at a contract with, it's RBW Consulting is who we're looking at. But basically trying to improve, once we get to 9-12, improve our program at 9-12 to effectively prepare kids to go into the workplace. Some of that work looks like, and I know there's been some conversation, Ms. Williams has been a part, Dr. Williams has been a part of some conversation in the past around pre-ET services, and so we're going to look at enhancing our programming around that, providing students opportunities to engage in meaningful employment, and making sure that our instruction in the school setting is preparing kids for those opportunities. So that's another thing that we're looking at through the DIF grant. So quite a few things going on just in that space alone. In addition to that, and this is kind of, I didn't know how to organize this, to be honest with you, because there's a number of things that I just wanted to mention while I was here. So there was a question around LDOE monitoring. I know that I spoke to you guys maybe about a year ago about the monitoring that we had. There were a couple of findings I reported to you guys. We told you what we were doing to address that. Long story short, in the spring of last year, we participated in a follow-up monitoring. As part of that follow-up monitoring, they looked at, I can't remember the number, but it felt like a significant number of IEPs, and found that there were no issues of noncompliance. And so that's been essentially, I don't call it dismissed, but that's no longer an issue for us. And I do want to name as well, and that's one of the things Ms. Blake talked about with the case manager model that we've looked at I. Lewis. That model is really helpful in a couple of different ways. It does help us prioritize academic instruction for kids. We've got people who aren't so worried about the IEP piece, they're worried about the instruction piece. But having a person who can spend their time working on the IEP piece helps us to ensure that we're compliant in those things. So I think that's going to be kind of a double positive for us. Moving on to SPED cameras, I do want to note for everybody, in the name of student safety and protecting our students, I know this is a concern all around the country. It's definitely a concern for us here in Lincoln Parish. What we've done is we've added two cameras in all of our self-contained classrooms along with a recorder. that just services those classrooms, so that we make sure we've got plenty of footage in those spaces. So there were some state funds made available. We've utilized those to make sure that we've gone above and beyond to protect those spaces, protect our kids in those spaces. In addition to that, so LEA determination, the State Department, and this gets a little bit complex, but the State Department has a rubric that they use to evaluate school systems, special education programs within school systems. And so they've given us, and this is a lagging indicator, so over a couple of months ago, they gave us data for 21-22 and for 22-23. So I would expect over the summer that we would get information for 23-24 and so forth and so on. But I do want to point out that the 21-22 data they give you a percentage. They rated us at 84.6%. We got 33 out of 39 points on the rubric. 22-23 data, we improved that to 89.7%, and we got 35 out of 39 points on the rubric. Just to be clear, the way that rubric works, there's an area that we receive an NA because it doesn't apply to us. However, those points are still factored into that 39. So we couldn't, if that stays true, we could never get more than a 95%. So there were 2 points is what we're missing out of the 30, really the 37 possible points that we can receive there. So anyway, all in all, things things are moving in a really positive direction. We're doing a lot of great things for our kids. Could we do more? Yes. Are we interested in doing more? Absolutely. But we just wanted to take, Ms. Blake and I wanted to take this opportunity to share out with you guys some of the things that we're doing. There's 2 more things that I want to share with you guys, just that I would highlight as being just absolute positives for our kids. You heard Ms. Blake talk about inclusive practices. You heard me talk about inclusive practices. And I think, like I said, we could always do better, but we've had several districts who have reached out to us and come and visited us over the last couple of months to see just how well things are going. When we speak to vendors who've been in our school systems and seen the work that we're doing, they're always so complimentary of just how well things are working here. Now, some of them have had to calm me down a little bit because I always want for things to be a little bit better. But they tell us over and over again just how well things are working here. So I just wanted to share that with you. The other thing is, and I know Ms. Martin's here, and I don't want to leave her out. I do want to talk for just a minute about Bearcat Buddies, but we've really seen, and it's not on every campus, but we're getting there on every campus. These inclusive practices involving our kids with more significant disabilities in spaces with kids who don't have disabilities. And it's a really great thing to see. I know that you guys walked through classrooms earlier, and you probably couldn't tell who was who, right? And that's the goal at the end of the day. We want for all of our kids to have a meaningful experience in all aspects of their time with us. So just to end off, and I mentioned Ms. Martin because they don't have an official program, but I've seen that in action there on their campus. But we do have a couple of campuses who have a program. I know you guys have probably heard about Bearcat Buddies. And so what I want to do, Maraja, part of the Bearcat Nation Network team, she participates in that work at Ruston High. And so I just want for her to briefly share her experience in the Bearcat Buddies program. It's okay, you can do it. She's a little shy.
So, good afternoon. I'm Maraja. I'm just like the pros and cons to Bearcat Buddies, or tell you why I joined it. So, for me, Bearcat Buddies, it just changed me because, I was one of them kids that didn't view them, as normal. I picked on them. But now, me being a buddy and me having a couple of buddies running around me calling me sister or whatever or whatnot, it really made me grow up, and it really made me accept them for who they are. See them as we're equal, if that makes sense. And I don't know. It's Bearcat Buddies. It's a great program. It's a great program. It teaches the kids how not to pick on kids that are different, how to see us all as equal. It just teaches them the fundamentals of trying to be normal. And we trying to teach them that it's okay not to be normal because everybody not perfect. I'm not perfect. Y'all not perfect. Especially Mr. Deard.
Amen.
Touche. Touche. So
I'll be on this afternoon. No.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
What
I'm
was the
sorry.
diploma, right?
So with that program, it's a humbling experience. And if I know it humbled me, y'all should see us work with them. It would humble y'all too. Now, that's all I got to say because I'm getting emotional talking about it. I don't know how to explain it, and I don't want to. I'm already nervous. I don't want to. Y'all don't want to see me cry, so I'm not gonna do that. But that's how Bearcat Buddies work. Oh, I'm gonna leave with this. When we had to fill out the application to be Bearcat Buddies, one of the questions that we had to fill out, it said, "Why do you want to be a buddy?" My response was, growing up IEP meetings, seeing just how they are confined, it just made me like light bulb in my head, like help them be outside just the classroom, like show them what really goes on at Preston High instead of just the classroom. So me being me, I did it. I did it. So, that's really it. Thank you.
I would just say, I didn't give any context to that, but the Bearcat Buddies program is an intentional effort to engage students with more significant disabilities, with students who don't have some of the same struggles. So,
And there's a waiting list now.
Yep.
We've got more students who want to be a mentor, who want to be a buddy, than we have students who need a buddy,
Right.
which is an incredible problem to have.
And that bleeds over to Special Olympics and just the engagement there in these places, because it's happening on all of our campuses, to be honest with you. But it's just really great to see. So, I don't know if there's any other questions for me at this point.
One question for me, and then there could be board members with other questions, but just as a question or an invitation to you and Phaedra and your department, if there's anything we as a board can do to help you, please let us know. We want to be a strong partner with you in what y'all do, so we're very thankful for what you do. So if there's things that you need, let us know. We'll be glad to take that into consideration, try to help out in all we can.
Gotcha. Thank
So,
you.
any other board members have any questions?
How has inclusion affected the student with disabilities progress? What I mean, like percentage, you know?
So,
Has it raised it?
So I think it's important to point out that, students are individuals, and that's the purpose of the IEP, is to really look at the individual needs of a kid. But I would say that, and that's the thing that when we're having these conversations with other districts and they want to see, is that they want to come see how we're doing it and how we're engaging them in those ways, because it's improved our academic performance. Like Ms. Blake talked about, getting kids closer to Tier 1 work, and really those systems that we've got for all kids. I mean, it's really just to improve those scores.
Especially it's not new to me. I've been married to a lady 52 years.
Yes, sir.
And she did special ed. And I put the first inclusion class at LePec.
Okay.
And they thought it was wrong, but kids mimic one another. And I thought that was great, and it worked. So my thing is, the more you include, the more they can pick up and learn.
Yes, sir.
Now, everybody in here know kids will mimic one another. And that's a great asset when inclusion is involved. So my thing is, your subgroup scoring should
Continue to
move up and elevate.
Yes, sir.
So when you talk about co-planning and you talked about carving out time, what does that look like?
So, which Ms. Blake can chime in, but really it's just being intentional about scheduling teachers and making sure that our teachers who are, I'm just going to give a for instance, but if you have a third grade teacher and third grade special education teacher, making sure that they've got the opportunity to work together. And I've said this a number of times, the standards are the standards, the goal's the goal, like that's the bar, that's what we have to be working towards. And so it's just about scheduling time for those folks to come together and talk about, what do we need to do in order to address the needs of all the kids, right? With students with an IEP being a part of all the kids. But yeah, it's just about being intentional about the time that teachers have to come together to work together.
Do you feel as though, because when you talk about inclusion, it's very expensive to actually staff and co-teaching. When you're planning, are you doing vertical or horizontal? I mean, how are you staffing it? Do you have enough personnel there to actually go in there and teach?
So with that, I mean, oh man, this is a very long conversation probably, but I think everybody would argue more people, right? I think it is, but you got a physical report here just a minute ago, right? And so it's trying to make the most of the money that we do have as a district. Being intentional with that, it's, there are some spaces where we don't have one teacher, one grade, where maybe we're covering more than one grade with a special education teacher. It's just really about being intentional, working with those folks, making sure that they've got the time to come together and do those things. So in terms of how are we staffing it, I mean, we're staffing it like we've been staffing it. I think and that's just if we're talking about the co-teaching piece, but I think, and Ms. Blake spoke to the SPED best practices and the work with Nate Levinson. That's actually something I feel like is very, very promising for us, because it undoes to some extent the co-teaching work to some extent. And that's where we're at, is this analysis piece, like which one's given better results for us. But it undoes some of the thought process behind the co-teaching, and it gives you a lot more flexibility in terms of trying to meet the needs of kids. So I think that's going to be a really important thing for us to look at, obviously from the staffing perspective, the structure, how we're running our program. But at the end of the day, that's really going to come down to what's producing the best results for our kids.
And one of the things I want to recommend is when you look at conferences, like Ms. Blake mentioned, as she attends, she goes out of town, investing in our teachers, allowing them to go to conferences. Because when you see core, if you staff it in like a math co-teacher for that particular elementary, allow them to go to national conferences and things like that. Because sometimes coaches can go and specialists can go, but that's different from that actual teacher.
Right. Yeah, I do believe in sending people to be trained. I do believe in that. And not just sending everybody at the district office level, really to work your way down to the classroom teacher. I do think it's important that we go hand in hand, right, to those trainings, and we participate in those things together, because, we might go in and hear completely different things, but that gives us an opportunity to come back to the table and normal in those things and make sure that what we're doing is right, make sure it's the best thing that we can do in the interest of our kids.
I think that's important too, like what you're saying, Dr. Williams, like we're doing two buckets of work. Like part of it is the work on changing the mindsets. Like educators are very traditional, and so for a very long time it's like special education teachers only needed to know about this particular thing. But as we're pushing them closer and closer to, like, I need you to know about this academic content as well, like they need to be going with general education teachers when we provide them opportunities to go to conferences and all of those things, because they have to be responsible for that content too. So I think we're moving in that direction, but we're trying to get them closer and change the mindsets while we're on the way.
And one of the things too, when we discussed, because you mentioned leapfrog, as a board, looking at stipends and things for teachers, that special education teachers, because as a former special ed teacher, that's not a 40-hour-a-week job. Like I used to have to write IEPs on weekends, after hours, and things like that. So that could be something that we can look at, because it's a lot of work. It really is. And so when we talk about leapfrog and things like that, that could be a conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to have those. Anything else?
Any other questions? If not, thank you, Justin. I appreciate that very much. We'll invite Phaedra back up to discuss the superintendent's diversity committee that he has. So Phaedra, if you will.
Good afternoon again. So the Diversity Committee has met a couple of times this school year. The first meeting was scheduled for the 26th of September. However, we did not get a chance to meet. But our first official meeting that we did get a chance to meet, we met on November 21st. And what we saw when we got to that meeting was an immediate need to diversify the Diversity Committee. A lot of times when people start to think diversity, they think, oh, this just needs to be Black or African American people, but that is not true at all. Before we had gone to the meeting, myself and the other two members of the committee who are district staff, we had reached out to Dr. Hester and Dr. Cleveland, who do diversity and equity and inclusion work across the country, just to give us some guidance on what the committee should look like, what things should we prioritize. And one of the things that they suggested was doing an audit, but we are already undergoing that process through Attuned. So they were very, happy to hear that we were already in the process of revamping our strategic plan. So some of the things that we elevated from the preliminary results of our plan with Attune was that enrollment in honors and advanced level classes was predictable based on race. And so one of the things that we talked about as a committee is why is that? And a lot of times we really get together and just talk about why are things happening. And so the recommendation was for us to reach out to our school counselors and school leaders to see what is the process that you use for enrolling students in dual enrollment, honors, advanced placement classes, and even at the lower elementary level in enrichment classes. And so we did that, and our next meeting was virtual. We brought that information back. And the committee agreed that the process that we're using as a district was fine, but where we could probably spend more of our time is educating parents on, yes, dual enrollment classes, advanced level classes may be a lot of work. A lot of teachers a lot of students run away from their summer reading assignment. They don't want to do that, but the benefits in the long run really help students. And so we talked about ways that we could provide some education to parents about, even if they may not have the test score, inquire about enrolling in those advanced level classes. Some other areas of opportunity for the committee that we talked about was maybe truancy, how can we help with truancy, how can we help parents learn information about curriculum and other opportunities that we have in our district. We did have to get permission from Superintendent Durrett to add 3 additional seats to our committee, and he did grant us permission to do that, just so that we could make sure that we had representation for our Hispanic families on the committee as well. And when we had our last meeting on January 13th, we had filled one of those additional seats, and she is very happy to be serving and representing our Hispanic families. The Attune survey, I think it's scheduled to go out this week to students, and so hopefully we will have some information back from that survey so that we are not just creating our own initiatives. We want the initiatives to be based on the things that we see are happening in our district and the needs that we have. We have another meeting coming up in February, but I think one of the things that has helped us a lot is educating ourselves so that we can have correct information when there might be some places that miscommunication is out there. But as always, if there are any recommendations from the board of things that you want us to discuss or explore, we're always open to that. Any questions?
So the Attune, you said that you're undergoing the Attune right now, or you've received results?
Well, as the district, they are helping us to revamp our strategic plan. And so I can't remember when it was that we had some preliminary results, but the survey to students will go out this week.
Okay, so when do you plan on releasing that to the board as far as the preliminary results?
When do I think that's a district decision. Mr. Durrett, is there?
Yeah, that is for, the Attune does those surveys. It's actually going out to teachers this year.
Okay.
We've done students in the past years. This year's Ruston High, Ruston Junior High, and I. Lewis. Those results we get them back. Attune accumulates them and then meets with us about updating our strategic plan from the results of some of those.
And I apologize. I may have made it seem like it was just something for the diversity committee, but when we talked to Dr. Hester and Dr. Cleveland, they suggested that if there's already some data collection process in place, that it would be good to use that data.
Yeah, we've been doing some of these over the last 5 years with Attune.
So what I'm assuming is they've done some type of SWOT analysis. That's probably what they did. They looked at our strengths, weaknesses,
Correct.
opportunities, and
Correct.
threats. Okay, so when will the board get a copy of those strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats? And if they're saying it's predictable for the different areas, say for instance, the high school, if they're predictable like honors classes, jump start and all of that, what are we doing to correct that? Like, it's not just educating the parents. We have a new accountability system that's coming. And every child has to see growth.
Absolutely.
So what are we doing? Because we're gonna have our letter grades in these different schools are gonna drop if we don't address that.
Correct. I'm not sure if that falls under the requirements of the diversity committee, but the Attune survey is more district-wide. So what we did is we don't want to just be, I guess, preparing initiatives that don't align to our district plan. So that's the only reason that we looked at the preliminary results from the Attune survey, so that what we did as a committee aligned with what we're also doing as a district. And so I think once those official results are available, I think everybody will know.
I think adding Hispanics on that diversity committee is a plus.
Absolutely.
When I first brought this issue up about a diversity committee, to me, it means equal representation for every child in this system.
Absolutely.
And to hear that you added the Hispanics people there is a plus. Because I never could understand. I hope one of them told me, why would you send English homework home when mom and daddy can't speak nothing but Spanish? So we need to reach out to them just like we do everybody.
Absolutely. And we still have 2 additional seats that we are going to fill, but we wanted to make sure that everybody is equally represented.
We want people that's going to speak up and speak out.
Absolutely.
Not ride the horse until you get tired and get a drink of water. We want folks going to step up and make comments that's usable.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So what ratio of those two positions are you looking to?
Well, the positions are not open based on like they have to be filled with a Hispanic person or they have to be filled with a white person. It's not like that. But the majority of the vast majority of the board right now is Black and African American students, parents. So we want to just make sure that we leave those seats open. I am actually waiting on confirmation from 2 people, one Hispanic and one white person, to see if they are interested in serving.
With the, like Mr. Ferguson said, just this week, I received a request, a confirmation from the State Department to serve on their focus group dealing with English language learners.
Okay.
Like it's very serious. Like
Absolutely.
they're taking it serious here in the state. Not that they have before, but it's a big push now.
Absolutely.
And so that's one of the things that we just have to make sure we're staying on top of.
I agree.
So how many positions, how many people are on this committee at this point?
9. 10. We added the lady 10. So we have 2 additional positions available.
Any other questions? Thank you, Phaedra, for your hard work on the
Thank you.
committee. We really appreciate it. Okay, let's move on to item number 8.3, which is personnel. Dr. Lewis.
I'd like to report 1 administrative retirement, 5 faculty and staff retirements, 3 faculty and staff resignations, 2 faculty recommendations, 2 transportation retirements, 1 transportation termination, 1 transportation resignation, and 2 transportation recommendations.
Thank you. Again, that packet of information is in your packet. Okay, Ms. Duke, let's cover 8.4, 8.5, and 8.6 with you.
All right, thank you. Sales tax report for collections received in January of 2025. For this month, collections are about even with collections last January. Overall, for the year, total collections are up 4.36% to fiscal year to date. So we're a little more than halfway through the fiscal year. The next report is our financial reports for our general fund. We have, as far as performance goes in this fund, our revenues, we've collected approximately 42.5% of our budget as of the period ending December 31, 2024. expenditures, we have expended approximately 42.76% of our budget. And for our special revenue funds, revenues are about 41.89% of what's budgeted, and expenditures are 51.2% of budgeted expenditures for all of our special revenue funds combined. Overall, at this point, our fund balances represent, combined for general fund, approximately 41.3% of total budgeted operating expenses for the year. The last report that we have is our group health insurance fund for the plan year ended December 31, 2024. Total plan contributions for this 12-month period is $15.18 million. We did increase contributions slightly over last year just because of the increases in costs that we have realized. As Ms. Tynes had pointed out in our financial report, we had an increase in contributions of approximately $535,000 over the 2023 plan year. Total plan expenses for the calendar year, for the plan year 2024 of $17.1 million compared to $15.9 million in 2023. That's approximately an increase of $1.2 million over the prior year. Total change in net assets, whenever you take our total contributions minus our total expenses, we have a decrease of $1.9 million in our net assets. When you combine that with the change in net assets for 2023, that's over a $3 million decrease. So, board members, you know the changes that you approved back in October for having premium increases. We're going to see that increased contributions to the plan by members and by the school board. And then we started those collections in January as well. And so you will see an increase in that reporting starting with the new plan year report for January next month. And that's all I have.
Thank you very much. Mr. Superintendent.
Okay, so just a couple of things. February 13th is our PD day in February. And then February 14th, all the schools will be closed. Everyone will be out. That is in recognition of our students and teachers' work for coming in A district. And then April 15th, this is advance notice, is our job fair out at the STEM Center from 4:30 to 6. So we want to try to get that word out to everybody. April 15th at the STEM Center for job fair. That's all I got.
Thank you very much. Anything else from board members?
Yes. This new insurance, if you have a problem, your constituents are calling, please direct them to Ms. Duke and the insurance lady at the school board office. They can better clarify what you frustrated with. So if you would, pass it on. That's it.
Thank you. Anybody else? If not, I hear a motion to adjourn. Thank you very much, Ms. Hancock. Do I have a second? Second. All in favor say aye.